Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Holistic Living Podcast. Today, we are talking about anxiety, just giving you some more information and insight into understanding what anxiety is, and more importantly, how we can manage it. I would say almost every single person I meet today is struggling or dealing with anxiety in some form, some much more severe than others. I know so many people who experience panic attacks, time to time, who are always living in a state of constant anxiety, who are constantly anxious. And it really makes you think, why are more and more people today becoming more and more anxious? What is going on? And before we dive into this podcast, a few things I can say right off the top of my head is we are overstimulated. Everywhere we turn in our modern world, there's screens, there's so many social media platforms, which of course I use and love, but I feel like we're over consuming content, and we're gaming, and we're watching movies and on our phones, and we're just overexposed to blue light and to constant stimulation from our screens. And on top of that, we're working crazy hours, and life is hectic, and we're picking up kids from school and taking them to sports, and then working, and then coming home and cooking and cleaning, and just going from one thing to the next, one event to the next. Most of us, I think I can confidently say, have very little downtime to truly relax. And I actually am totally a culprit of this. I have a hard time just sitting and doing nothing. When I truly have nothing to do, my brain cannot turn off, and I have to get up and start working or doing something. And so many people are like that. We're just overstimulated that we don't know how to relax anymore, how to truly not be on our phone, not be thinking about work, just sitting there and relaxing and deep breathing and doing nothing. And I'll go into this as well as we start and dive into this podcast. But I feel like lately, the concept of meditation and deep breathing and just kind of taking yourself out of all of that stimulation and getting into a headspace of pure calm and relaxation is becoming more popular. And I love that I see more and more people talking about it, and it's great. And I think it's something that we all need to get back to and really make it part of our daily routine. But there are definitely issues with what we're going through with our modern world and being overstimulated that is causing more people to be anxious. And of course, there's dietary factors and so much more. So we're going to dive into all of that. Right now, anxiety is definitely a condition that is plaguing our population, and it leads to so many, numerous health conditions over time if it's not managed. Understanding how we can manage our anxiety can really help us prevent a lot of inflammation and side effects that come as a result of being chronically stressed. We all think of anxiety as an emotion similar to joy, fear, anger, etc. However, anxiety is actually not an emotion. It is a sensation. It's when your sympathetic nervous system turns on. And the anxiety that we are experiencing is the sensation that we experience when our sympathetic nervous system is stimulated. The sympathetic nervous system will turn on for multiple reasons. One of them, being a response to stimuli from the environment, changes in our body chemistry, hormonal imbalances, lack of sleep, our response to our own troubling thoughts, especially past traumas and things like that. Most people will think anxiety is only triggered by our thought process. And so in order to try and stop anxiety, most people will try and change their thought process. This is definitely a piece to the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle. It's just one factor to consider. So while you might be on the right track, if you are changing your thought process, and it's definitely a beautiful place to start, it's not going to give you true results of removing or lowering your anxiety if it's all you're doing. So it's really important for us to understand the range of triggers of anxiety so we don't always connect the feeling of anxiety to our life stressors. This just causes us to worry more. Worry is an emotion and is not favorable to our health. So how does anxiety work, and what should we do when experiencing it? Well, typically, in evolutionary terms, anxiety is the feeling or sensation that tells you to stop foraging for food, to look around and see if you're about to be attacked by a predator. Just when you're in your backyard and watching your pet. We had chickens, for example, for a couple summers, a couple years actually, and they would just be walking around the property, picking at the dandelions or at the bugs. And then suddenly they would all at the same time kind of perch up. Their necks would go stiff. They would be still, super, super still. And then they would randomly fly away. Or they would resume back to eating. That's that sensation, that fight or flight reaction where something happens. They hear a sound, there's a noise, something that tells them, should I be ready to run, to flee? That's that fight or flight reaction. That's that sensation of anxiety. This is your body. It's telling your body the sensation that you get when you stop and are looking around. It's telling your body to bring blood away from your digestive organs and send it to your muscles and heart to flee. So to flee, to fight or flight. Anxiety is needed for survival. And when, you see, like I said, animals walking around and then all of a sudden they stop and freeze, this is what they're doing. Their anxiety from an unfamiliar sound or an instinct is telling them to stop what they're doing and decide if they need to run for their life. If so, their heart rate will increase, cortisol and epinephrine are released, and so on. And then they can run faster and farther. And us humans are the same way. So this is something to just kind of keep in the back of your mind, this response that's actually happening when we are anxious. Both auditory and visual stimulation drive the activation of the midbrain, the mesencephalon, which drives the sympathetic nervous response. We're going to get a little bit technical here, but bear with me. We're going to get away from the technical and move back into more of a normal conversation. I just want to share this more of scientific information with you really quick for those of you who are interested. Visual stimuli arrive at a superior colliculus of the midbrain. So auditory stimuli, so sound, arrive at the inferior colliculus. So these are essentially two bumps on the back of the midbrain. When you get a visual stimulus, so you see movement in your peripheral visual field while you're grazing. So for example, a chicken sees from the corner of their eye a dog. Or an auditory stimulus, so they hear a twig snap. These stimuli will trigger the sympathetic nervous system, and the signals will stimulate the sympathetic nervous system before you've even registered anything consciously. But you do feel the sensation of your sympathetic nervous system turning on, and that sensation is anxiety. You feel like you're not safe. You'll pick your head up and look around for a predator. If you're walking on the side of the road and you just have that sense that someone's following you, you're going to turn around. You're going to have that sensation of anxiety. So the sympathetic nervous system is not only turned on by predators, it can be turned on by other factors such as NF-kappa B in the central nervous system, which drives corticotrophin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. This drives sympathetic nervous system activation. So with that information, central nervous system inflammation or brain inflammation can make you anxious in a way that has nothing to do with cognitive or emotional content. For this reason, concussions, dysbiosis, leaky gut, and so many other conditions can actually cause chronic anxiety. So again, with this information, what we're trying to say is you can have, anxiety triggered by PTSD, by some kind of traumatic event, of course, but there's usually more to it because it's not just our thought process that triggers anxiety. It is that central nervous system stimulation by a predator. So by something like visual, by an auditory stimulus, by, watching too many screens, things like that. And so that is why concussions and having nutrient deficiencies or pathogens, all of these things can also cause chronic anxiety, which is also a reason why our anxiety is skyrocketing these days. We're 2023, and every time you look at the statistics, it's like, wow, more and more people are dealing with anxiety or even depression. So what do we typically do when we feel anxious? Most of the time, we try to connect the sensation of anxiety to a list of problems in our life. I'm anxious today. It's because I am tight on money this week, or it's because I am in an abusive relationship, or it's because I'm nervous about the future, or whatever the reason might be. We're usually connecting it to a list of problems in our life. However, many times there are no issues in our life to trigger anxiety. However, we're still feeling it. When we assume anxiety is always anxiety about something, we confuse a sensation of anxiety with the emotion of worry. This mistake sends us in the direction of stirring the pot on our emotional content. So it's not a good idea. It keeps the sensation of anxiety away from the emotional life. Putting them together does not help either one. So again, you can have a sensation of anxiety and an emotion of worry. They are not the same thing. So it gets important here to really start to differentiate. I am anxious. What is causing my anxiety? Is it my worries, the feelings that I'm having, the emotions that I'm having? It is most likely, maybe it's partly that, but the sensation of anxiety and that central nervous system activation is not being triggered by that. There's something deeper that's going on, and that's what we want to be really looking at. So the best approach to recognizing and managing anxiety is understanding that it is most likely a signal of biology rather than psychology. The approach everyone should take when trying to manage anxiety is to look at the body systems that are out of balance and then correct those. This information that I'm sharing with you, talking about anxiety being a sensation rather than an emotion, is not something I've made up. This has been, explained extensively from psychologists and through many studies, etc. So where should we start? I'm going to share with you my steps to getting to the root and improving your anxiety. And these do work if you commit to them. So step 1 is always begin correcting your diet, because bad food creates gut inflammation, which will trigger brain inflammation and then anxiety. And this is thanks to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve that connects the gut and the brain. Again, this is proven and studied extensively. So this is not something that's just my personal opinion. The vagus nerve connects the gut and the brain. So if you are to go and give a public speech to say 10,000 people and you start to get super nervous and you start feeling nauseous and a little shaky and all of that, that is the vagus nerve. You have that anxiety, that brain inflammation that then creates gut inflammation, causing anxiety, maybe causing loose stools and whatever else you start, those feelings you start to get when you're anxious. So that's from the vagus nerve. We have a very strong gut-brain connection. So if there is anxiety, you're going to have gut inflammation, but vice versa. So if you are eating bad foods and drinking a lot of alcohol and things like that, you're going to have gut inflammation, which because of the vagus nerve will create brain inflammation. So will create more central nervous system activation, and that will create more sympathetic nervous system activation, and that will create more feelings of anxiety, more sensations of anxiety. Bad foods such as gluten, sugar, canola oil, processed meats, chips, and lots of chocolate and all these things, these are triggering histamine release, which will trigger anxiety. So by cleaning up the diet, sticking to eating a whole foods diet that is full of dark leafy green veggies, lean proteins, healthy fats, and fiber is going to help so much. And if you stop eating in the evening, instead of eating, stop eating by around 6 p.m. instead of eating 8, 9, or 10 p.m., this will also help so much. So if you are to eat later at night, try to stick to things like nuts or apples rather than eating like a piece of pizza at 9 or 10 p.m. Because we don't digest our food well at night, our gut kind of shuts down at night. We will get more inflamed essentially if there's food sitting in our system through the night. So that will create more anxiety. So this is not to say you can never enjoy good food and go out and have some junk food, but it shouldn't be a staple. I know so many people who wake up in the morning and they have a big junky muffin for breakfast, and then they'll have a croissant and some processed meat for lunch, and then dinner time comes around and it's like pasta or pizza or takeout. And while these foods are delicious, they are keeping our guts super inflamed, and we are also getting nutrient deficiencies because we're not eating a diet that's rich in leafy greens and vegetables and fresh fruit and healthy lean proteins that are not processed and that don't contain carcinogens and things. So cleaning up the diet's important. And again, it's not to say every single meal constantly has to be clean, but if the majority of your diet is whole foods and is healthy, you should be able to enjoy those meals here and there as a treat, and it shouldn't cause anxiety or trigger so much inflammation. And that brings us to step 2. Once diet is corrected, you want to check on how you're sleeping. Sleep affects our anxiety for numerous reasons, but the most important trigger for anxiety in regards to sleep is not sleeping within the circadian rhythm window. If you guys have been following me for any period of time, you will always hear me talk about our circadian rhythm. I sound like a broken record, but it is so important. If you go to bed too late and wake up later in the day, you are not reaching those important alpha and delta waves and that REM sleep, that REM sleep at night, which leaves your body exhausted no matter how many hours you slept. And I can't tell you how many times I work with clients and they say, I'm sleeping 10 to 12 hours at night and I am still so exhausted. And I ask them, well, when are you going to bed? And they're saying, I'm going to bed around 12 or 1 a.m. and I wake up 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. And they're just not getting those proper waves of sleep because they're not sleeping within the circadian rhythm. So exhaustion and fatigue will trigger anxiety. The best way to prevent anxiety is sleeping with your circadian rhythm, which means going to bed between 10 and 10:30 p.m. and waking up between 6:30 and 7 a.m. Now, I know what a lot of you might be thinking is, I work late, I can't get to bed that early, or I don't want to go to bed that early, or how am I possibly going to go to bed at 10 or 10:30 when I don't go to bed till 1 or 2 a.m.? This is not something that needs to happen overnight. You don't need to go from sleeping around, 1 or 2 a.m. to jumping to go to bed at 10 p.m. because most likely you're going to have a hard time falling asleep. But if you can push your bedtime earlier or push it back an extra 10 minutes each night or even 5 minutes and slowly bring yourself closer to that 10:30 or even 11 p.m. bedtime, it will do wonders for your circadian rhythm. It will take time. So, sleeping consistently within this time frame or window to really start to see the results of it, but it will come and you will start to feel so much better. Another thing too is when you are going to bed, again, within that circadian rhythm window versus outside of that window, you're going to have, and one other note is to do it consistently. So not go to bed, 10:30 one night and then midnight the next night and then 9 p.m. the next night and then, whenever. You want to keep it consistent. But when you start to keep it consistent, you will notice that you're so much more energized in the morning, especially. You're not going to have that sluggish feeling. You're going to be ready to tackle your day. It really does make a difference. And then that brings us to step 3. So once sleep and diet are down, these are the 2 most important things to start to correct. Once you have that in the bag and you're feeling really good, you want to look to the gut. Oftentimes dysbiosis, which is just an imbalance of good and bad pathogens. So you have a dominance of yeast or fungus or parasites or bacteria in the gut compared to good probiotics. So that's what dysbiosis is. So oftentimes dysbiosis is present. And this will cause a lot of histamine release and inflammation that will trigger, again, that brain inflammation. Doing a good candida cleanse, like a candida and parasite cleanse, which I will have linked in the description of this podcast. It's also on my website, a really good candida and gut bundle that you can follow. If you do a good candida cleanse, you eat a lower starch diet for a bit, take some antifungals, you can drastically improve your anxiety once it's completed. I would say one of the most common improvements that I see from my clients and followers that use my program is that first thing that they tell me is my anxiety is cleared up or so much better. That's usually the first thing. Anxiety and energy are usually the first things to improve for most people when they do this kind of a program. And it's because as they lower that gut inflammation, because of that vagus nerve, the brain inflammation dramatically improves and therefore neurotransmitter output. So you're going to feel happier and more uplifted. And then of course that sympathetic nervous system is not activated. So that anxiety sensation that you would get when it is activated is not there. So you're not having those feelings of anxiety. And then step 4. Step 4 is exercise. Lack of exercise can trigger anxiety. Since exercise helps with our circulation, it gets blood flowing to the brain, it gets oxygen to the brain, which again, we need for healthy brain function. So you don't want to be sedentary. Move your body and exercise, and this will help reduce anxiety. I know so many people have a hard time with this because they don't enjoy working out. I don't want you to think that you have to hit the gym and lift weights in order to have, this type of an improvement. But taking, a nice, beautiful walk, going for a hike, getting that oxygen in your lungs, doing having a good swim, a good jog, whatever you like to do. It could be biking, it could be playing soccer. Take a form of activity that you personally like and know that it's something you are probably more likely to stick with. And if that's just walking, then do that. But take some form of exercise and just be consistent with it. The more you do it, the more you'll start to make it a habit. You'll fall in love with it. And it's not about being motivated to move your body, but more importantly, being disciplined. So just like if you were to get disciplined and make sure I have to drink my water every day, I need to have a clean diet, I need to go to bed around 10:30, 11, make exercise a discipline as well. Pick a time where you will get it into your day every day, no matter what, unless you're sick or something like that. And even if you're not feeling it, you're doing it anyway because it's part of your routine, not because you need to feel motivated to do it. I hope that makes sense. It could be going to the gym. It could be, again, a walk, a hike, a bike ride, whatever that is for you, but move your body. I can't stress how important this is. As most of us are, having sedentary jobs, we're sitting on a desk or a couch or, driving in our car and we're not moving. And so we're becoming so stagnant. And that, again, circulation and blood flow to the brain is inhibited a little bit. Step 5 is working with a practitioner to ensure all your hormones and nutrients are in balance. Your thyroid, estrogen, testosterone, these imbalances can create anxiety because they throw off the entire function of the body. It's so important, both men and women, to have a stable hormonal system, specifically adrenals as well. The adrenals are like the center of our cortisol production and our anxiety response. If we have adrenal fatigue, if we're chronically stressed, our adrenals will definitely need support in order to break out of that sympathetic nervous system stimulation. So it is so important, if you're not sure how to go about it, what to do, work with a practitioner who will check your levels, who will look at what symptoms you have and figure out how to support your thyroid, your adrenals, your hormones, whatever is out of balance, and bring them back into balance. And you will be so amazed and surprised at how quickly your anxiety clears up by doing this. It's crucial to have your hormones in balance because it's almost like a symphony. Every hormone is a special instrument. And if you're missing one or having too much of one, the music is going to sound off. It's going to sound bad. No one's going to want to listen to it. It's not going to sound right. It's not going to work right. And that's how our body is. If our hormones are not in the right balance and the right amounts and proportions, you're going to have a very poorly functioning system. With that as well, nutritional deficiencies, poor methylation, and even certain genetic SNPs all will cause imbalances within the brain that lead to anxiety. So there's so much more to anxiety. I know so many people will say, I eat clean, I move my body, I drink lots of water, I sleep good, but I'm still anxious. And these are the people that really want to start looking to hormonal imbalances. What nutrients are you deficient in? Is your body methylating properly? Are there certain genetic SNPs? Maybe your COMT pathways are bogged down, or maybe you're not detoxifying or methylating properly, and so you're ending up being more inflamed. Your sympathetic nervous system is more activated. Maybe you have brain inflammation again, which needs to be addressed with the right support. So you want to work with a practitioner if you can to get to the bottom of that. If you've done, the steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 and still no improvement with your anxiety. Getting to the bottom of your biological imbalance is going to be crucial to not only stop anxiety, but to prevent it from flaring up in the future. The last one I want to leave you with is re-stimulating your vagal motor outflow using a TENS machine. A TENS unit can help decrease both gut and brain inflammation and therefore reduce anxiety. We naturally will lose our vagal tone or outflow over the years just from chronic stress, age, gut inflammation, toxic food, dysbiosis, antibiotics, etc. So it is so crucial to make sure that we are stimulating our vagus nerve, especially if you have a history of a concussion. This is like a must, and a 100% must for you. I would say a 99% must. You would always want to check with your doctor before using a TENS unit, but stimulating the vagus nerve one way or another is so important because especially when I mention concussions, it just creates poor vagal outflow because of all the brain inflammation you get from a concussion. And so that nerve will need to be re-stimulated. TENS machines can be bought online. I have so many videos on Instagram and YouTube explaining how to do it. I also have a TENS machine guide on my website, which is really handy as well. And I will link it in the description of the podcast as well. It's like super, super affordable, but it just walks you through how to use a TENS machine. And essentially the machine should cost you about $30. You can use it every single day, take it around with you. If a chiropractor or other practitioners are to do the TENS stimulation for you, they charge like $30. So one session that they would charge you can cover the cost of the unit and you can have it the rest of your life. I always recommend doing TENS stimulation for every single day for a good couple weeks to month. And then from there, a couple times a week. And then you can go down to maybe once a week and then just a couple times a month for maintenance. But it is so important. It re-stimulates that vagal nerve using little electrical impulses and will help to reduce your anxiety over time. So those are my tips and recommendations. Looking into, I guess I would say actually, before I leave you with one final thought, it is also important to address traumas and emotions, because while these are not the same as anxiety, they can be triggering anxiety. So what you want to be doing is definitely looking into potentially seeing a professional, a therapist, or someone you can talk to if there is some major trauma in your life, and just get to the bottom of it and move past it so it's not constantly on your mind. So that worry, that emotion, that worry emotion is not constantly on your mind, and you're not going to be confusing it with anxiety. So getting to the root of that's very important as well. But looking into your health and your lifestyle, like food, sleep, stress chemistry, which drives inflammation, lack of exercise, or other primarily biological mechanisms will help you get to the root of your anxiety. I know this sounds like a huge to-do list, especially if you aren't doing any of these things right now. Don't let this cause you more anxiety. Really take it one step at a time. Pick one thing. Start with your diet. You don't have to cut everything out, but if you can even focus on adding nutrients in, eating more healthy foods, that's a great starting point. Giving your body something to work with, some vitamins and minerals and antioxidants that your whole system needs to function is a good starting point. Get lots of good hydration. Start trying to go to bed a little bit earlier. Try to turn off some screens, maybe an hour before bed. Use blue light blocking glasses if you're on screens a lot during the day. Turn on your blue light blocking settings on your phone and your laptop so that even though you are on your screens, whether it's for work or whatever else, at least you're not having as much blue light exposure, which can create that central nervous system activation. So just doing little things is so important. And then from there, you can slowly start getting to the more complicated things, working with a practitioner and starting TENS stimulation and all the other stuff. But the most important, step 1, step 2, work on your diet and things like that first. You will find, and your circadian rhythm, your sleep, you will find that most people who just start here already have drastically improved anxiety. One other thing to mention, which I forgot to mention earlier, but deficiencies, I sort of touched on this in step 5, but deficiencies specifically in things like B12 and omega-3s, like EPA and DHA, and all of these things can also create the sensation of anxiety because your sympathetic nervous system is more activated when you have these deficiencies. So even supplementing with a B complex, if it's appropriate for you, or, a good fish oil, things like that, that might be something to start helping you as well. I see people get put on medication from doctors as soon as they say that they have anxiety. And I think that a lot of people are overprescribed medication when there are simple fixes like get more nutrients into your diet or go to bed earlier. There's certain things that can really just give you a drastic change without too much of a stress or impact on your life. So think about those tips. I hope that you found them helpful. I hope you learned something today about the difference between anxiety being a sensation, whereas we normally think of it as an emotion, but it's a sensation, and how you can kind of navigate improving it. If you follow these tips, I am pretty confident you will have a completely different a different sensation. Instead of feeling anxious all the time, you'll be feeling more uplifted, happy, lighter. So I hope that that's the experience for you. If you ever have any questions, you can always reach me through my social media, and I can help any way that I can. I hope you guys have a wonderful day or night from wherever you're listening from. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.